my esteemed colleagues, friends, from my dear friend Veronique, from the European Union who sponsored this. I'm honored. I'm deeply honored to be here from a country which is maybe about 50 years older in its democratic processes, still learning. I come from a country of contradictions, and I'm sure you're facing those same contradictions here. My job today would be to somehow tell my story and see if there are some lessons from that story which you can learn. And I'm, of course, been learning since yesterday how you're dealing so beautifully with your own problems. But before I begin, it's a season of gifts. I bring what represents truly Indian, the modern India. And this modern India is what Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, our founder, thought was the way out for sustainability. And this is the spinning wheel. The spinning wheel in which he made his own cloth. And this is how he challenged the freedom struggle and the British Empire at that time and saw to it. So I present this to IFESA, Catherine, to you, as a symbol of our thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to be using a PowerPoint. I don't know how the lights are, the visuals of it, but what I would like to say is that a little bit about myself. I don't know what Catherine was talking about. I come from a refugee family, post-partition. 1947, India, Pakistan split. Both my parents were in Pakistan, that time the larger India. Both of them came as refugees to India. My father's father was a station master, very well-to-do, had a very big house. My mother's father was a small-time lawyer, and both of them left their families, everything, and came here. My father's father was deeply shocked because he lost everything. He came as a pauper. And my mother's father came to Delhi and he just hit upon a huge mansion which he occupied, and suddenly he became a big landlord. And I'm a product of that contradiction, where I had a father who was very rich and became very poor, and a mother who was very poor who became very rich. And somehow, across my life, I have been seeing this contradiction playing out in society in India, where the middle class is sort of slowly becoming this space for contradiction. And therefore it breeds love, it also breeds hate. It's jealous and yet it gives. And it's this swinging of values which was part of my own education. I was trained by a Jesuit school with Jesuit values, with Christian values, deeply committed to the poor. And I did my master's, of course, and then went on to start setting up organizations in the civil society space, because I thought between market and state, civil society has a space. It's a space where we create tension between the three, a creative tension which holds values, which reaches out to people, which talks to state, which also censures market, but also self-reflects as to where society is going. That's been my journey. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, this is the state where I come from, just a little bit from the map point of view. It's the state of Gujarat, the land of Gandhi, and now, of course, the land of the present Prime Minister of India too, who's won a huge majority in the last elections. Next, please. Before I go to these, I wanted to talk of four stories. Four stories which have changed my life. Ultimately our histories are in stories, and makes us who we are. My first story, and maybe I'll take just two of them, is 2002. We had a big, if those who know Indian history a bit, we had a big communal violence in the state where I come from. And thousands of people were butchered, and homelessness. And I was, at that time, about 48, 50 years old. And I was appointed by the Human Rights Commission to look into appropriate, if there are any needs of human rights violations, how do you address rehabilitation, how do you address law and order. And I was going around the refugee camps of that city of Ahmedabad, and I was still very hopeful that, we'll be able to reconcile, we've done a lot of peace work, we'll get them together, life in the city will go on because we've had these incidents in the past. And as I was driving out of one of those refugee camps where thousands of people of one community were there, I saw young children outside the slum playing a game which I used to play when I was small about cops and robbers. I don't know whether you played those games where some of you became police and some of you became robbers and we started chasing each other and catching each other. And I saw them playing this game, which are Hindu young boys, let's go kill the Muslims. And they were wearing the saffron caps, and I was shocked. I said, as civil society, we've done something terribly wrong. We've missed out on what's going on. Because when these stories become games, where children play these games, we've done something amazingly we're not there. We're not there enough to understand what's going on. We're not there to see that the narrative is now a game where children play and enjoy. To me, that deeply affected me, and we were into many other works, and I said, nothing doing for the next 20 years, I just need to work with children and young people to see what's going on. I still continue to try and do that. I'm going to the last story, and I'll skip the two in between because they're still more gory, but my colleague, and I don't know how many of you know the concept of untouchability. Untouchability means it's within the Hindu religion, there is a caste system. And there are 120 million people who are out of the caste system. And they are looked down upon, they're not touched. And newer forms of untouchability are being born. And of course, we have been working on education. And this friend of mine who works in a very large way reported this little story to me, which was about 20 kilometers from Ahmedabad, where a young boy apparently had died and committed suicide. And when we tried to find out why, the police registered a case of suicide, the fellow must be depressed. But some of my staff who went to see the body, the rigor mortis had developed, they opened his and found a note. And the note said, my teacher is always being very bad to me, abusing me, makes me sit at the back of the class, makes me clean the toilets. That's all right, but at least I'm learning, I'm studying, I'll grow up. But then one day, because I couldn't afford a book, he called my father and abused him and said, why do you send these people to school? They will never do anything in life. They will never grow up to be anything impossible that they would do. So there is no point teaching them. A teacher. And so, I thought I would grow, I will learn, but if my teacher tells me I have no future, why should I live? And this young boy of 13, committed suicide. I say this with pain because on the other hand, we have huge policies. There's a lot of development where we've done on establishing schools. Today, even last week, Dalits are lynched because they are coming up in life. The Muslims are killed because they are beef eaters. Something is going wrong. We are one of the fastest growing economies. The state I come from has a GDP which is the best in the country. But when it comes to Human Development Index, we are bottom third. We are still a hungry nation. And yet the inequalities is immense. The top 5% in our society are doing better than the top 5 anywhere in the world. The top 5% control almost 60% of the economy. This inequality to me is a big issue, and what it does to human values, to middle classism, where nobody is wanting to ask questions, nobody is wanting to find out what's going wrong, and everybody wants to play safe. This is where I come from. I also come from the land of Gandhi. I also come from the land of Ambedkar, who fought for independence and fought for values. What I'm going to try and do is, let's look at human society. And I saw 3 pictures which I think would be very interesting for us to reflect on. 2 of them are European and American one, and one is an Indian photograph. But to me, they say it all. Can I have the next, please? Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. I don't know how many of you have seen this picture. This is a human chiseling his own self, his own identity, making his own self. It's a bronze sculpture which is there in Europe. To me, it represents the right to choice, self-determination, and the learn to build one's own unique identity, essentially a core belief that individuals' history and life experiences, both painful and joyous, are sacrosanct. So at one level, are we giving that space for individual freedom, which is at the base of democracy? Are we having that scope to chisel our own selves and our own identity? And I think this is what is under threat. We are now supposed to follow some hero or some heroine and live our life trying to be that person and never be that. And in that contradiction, I become dehumanized. I don't find myself who I am. And I think our education system is just further dehumanizing, not letting people think, not letting people choose. This right choice is so fundamental to human species. The next photo is the photo of a Hindu woman, and you won't believe it, 1,000 years back. This lady, she was a sadhavi, which means she was a priestess, called Akama from the south. And when she saw discrimination against women, what she did was she went totally nude. 1,000 years back, she derobed herself and walked from village to village, demanding women's equality and caste equality. So the ability to protest is 1,000 years old, and I'm sure in Europe it'll be older, that feminism is not a new word, that women have been trying to express themselves, to find their rights. And we are still struggling with that in India. In spite of the feminist movement, the caste system puts women in a very, very marginalized space. And I think the third photo, I don't know how many of you have seen this photograph. I'm really sorry, the print is not really very visible, but I like to read what it says. Anybody knows this photograph? It's called The Truth Coming Out of the Well. The story goes something like this. It's a 19th century legend. It's a painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme of 1896 and is based on the legend. According to a 19th century, the truth and the lie met one day. Truth and lie met one day. The lie says to the truth, it's a marvelous day today. The truth looks up to the skies and sighs, for the day was really beautiful. They spent a lot of time together talking to each other. Ultimately arriving beside a well, the lie tells the truth, the water is very nice, let's take a bath together. The truth, once again suspicious, tests the water and discovers that it indeed is very nice. They undress and start bathing. Suddenly, the lie comes out of the water, puts on the clothes of the truth and runs away. The furious truth comes out of the well and runs everywhere to find the lie and to get her clothes back. The world, seeing the truth naked, turns its gaze away with contempt and rage. The poor truth returns to the well and disappears forever, hiding therein its shame. Since then, the lie travels around the world dressed as truth, satisfying the needs of society, because the world in any case harbors no wish at all to meet the naked truth. I think this represents the contradiction, and especially, as Yuval Harari says, and some of my friends would be saying, the post-truth era is here. Social media can win elections. And you can shout your truthful seminars, but nobody is listening. To me, this represents the discourse that is going on. Are we really interested in truth? Are we ready to ask those difficult questions? Are we ready in our education system teaching people to ask those difficult questions in universities? Or are we hegemonious and saying, there is only one truth and that is my truth? Are we open to believe that there are many truths? Next please. So we have a situation of, I think it's to this thing. What I'm really talking of is weakening of institutional values in the 21st century ecosystem. It's the institutional values which are, therefore, is competition for resources is getting acute. I think in Urdu or in your own language there's a word etbar. Institutions, both market, state, even society, civil society, are today untrustworthy. We don't trust them. Our core values, which is what we call insaniyat, humanism, is under stress. Because to be is equal to have is the paradigm. It's not to be by itself, but to be is to have. So the more you have, the more you are. the less you have, you are nobody. And therefore, shrinking spaces for self-actualization and the homogenization of human beings. Everybody must be the same, look alike, talk alike, eat alike. And in that is couched what I call the paradox of poverty and plenty, and the inequality debate as the center to which we must deal with. Violence is on the increase, from domestic to social violence, and India is showing higher and higher violence in the streets. Our streets were fairly safe, but today the streets are no longer safe. We have very non-inclusive development goals. We have the SDGs, but we know the lip service that is being paid, and whereas actually states are reducing public expenditure on health. They're wanting private players. They're reducing public expenditure on education. But we are committed to SDGs. And today the state has started actively discriminating not by default, because by default, when they would discriminate, we would take them to court. Today it's by design. And therefore, we don't have these meta-narratives on human values anymore. We have a lot of narratives which are telling us how to be more violent and how to have rather than to be. Next, please. I think we need to look at the deep structures of our institutions, which we are not doing enough. Ultimately, institutions are the mirrors of social power dynamics of the larger society. So they contain the same inequalities, discrimination, and biases as the larger society is, whether it's our educational institution, whether it's our political institution, and now we're seeing it in civil society too. These biases are usually practiced in hidden, subtle ways in what we call the deep structure of institutions. So you have the nice laws, the nice this thing, and then we know what's going on inside. But we don't want to recognize the naked truth. It's so ugly. So we like the dressed up truth, the lie in a dressed up way. The masculine culture of institutions is often embedded in this deep structure. Patriarchy is finding newer ways to express itself. It's no longer about men and women. It's even women who take on patriarchy by the values. Thus, the ongoing struggle to humanize and change institutions and build new ones becomes the challenge. Educational institutions have to rethink their idea of where the change has to be. It has to be first with oneself and then with the institutions they are supporting. Next, please. Sorry, can you go back? Go back. Yeah. So you have what I call the metaphor of the Buddha, and you have the snakes which are down there. And this is the contradiction I've been talking of since. What I have learned, next please, that conflict is implicit in inequality, exclusion and discrimination. So if you're going to have conflict, which means there is inequality, exclusion and discrimination. There are no two doubts about it. Wherever there is conflict, these three underpinning things will be there. And therefore, let's not talk of peace without first looking at why this is happening in society and what are the policies that can be. So when peace eludes us, we embrace conflict. There's no middle way. And the middle class are left doing nothing but talking. Therefore, to me, development essentially means disturbing the existing balance. You can't just say you can do one, add a little money here, a little money there. You have to disturb the social balance to recreate. And therefore, when I see myself irrecoverably losing, I escalate hate. And top of it, the weak rule of law. Veronica talked of human rights. One of the important legs of development is establishment of rule of law. And investment, public investment in rule of law. I can go into a litany of how it is the most underinvested paradigm or institution, whether it's judiciary, whether it's the police, whether it's this thing. It's in terms of where it needs to be. We will invest in roads because that will lead to economic development, but then you'll have a weak institution, rule of law, you're far away and you're... I always believed we are never born democratic. Our first 5 years, all of us, have been the most undemocratic period of our lives. And therefore democracy is learned behavior. It's not a born behavior. And therefore, how do families and schools nurture that value of democracy? Are we investing there? And therefore, I always say it's not being fit for democracy, but it's being fit through democracy. You just can't be fit for democracy. Next, please. And therefore, in the end, how do we ignite hope? I think celebrating diversity and interdependence in institutions, making them non-violent, is a critical area of investment. Increasing joyful spaces for children and youth, investing in rule of law, and making compassionate cities through dialogue spaces. I'll just take you through 3 attempts we as civil society are doing in our limited way as lessons. Next. This is Conflictorium. We have a museum on conflict in the heart of the city where the conflict is the maximum. It facilitates dialogue through art practice. It aims to serve as a platform for self-expression and conflict transformation. But it's not about giving lectures. It's about getting young people to express themselves and embrace conflict. Conflict is good. Violence is the problem. But we mix the two up. Next, please. We work with those who are discriminated, whether they are Muslims or Dalits, but see to it that they in turn work for vulnerability and not just work for themselves. This to me is critical. So we work with Muslims, but not just that the Muslim youth and leaders must work with other vulnerable. This ghettoization, Muslims work for Muslims, Dalit works for Dalits, women work for women, leads us nowhere. And the last one is working what I call a non-traditional livelihood. We have a program which I find the most fascinating, where women are being trained as taxi drivers. I know maybe in this country that's okay, but for us that women occupy the public road and take up that profession is a huge challenge. I'm just giving an example. I think the idea is we need women to take up non-traditional livelihoods and take up public spaces and not just be bound at home. And the last one, of course, is my pet, and Veronica knows that very well, is investing in rule of law, not through investing in the top judiciary, but building grassroots paralegals from communities who help in the access to justice framework. I think it's a long way. You have to keep at it. these 5-year projects and 3-year projects get us nowhere. Institutions have to think 10, 20, 30 years. And that's why I come here. I think educational institutions have to look beyond 2-year, 3-year project cycle. They're committing themselves to future. And I do hope resources and state don't look at them in outcomes and objectives in 2 years' time. They are only directional. But we need to have a vision for the next 30 years. We are struggling in India. My solidarity with Kyrgyzstan. We can be of any distinct exchange. We're happy to do so. Thank you very much.